I'm Eleanor Pam, president of Veteran Feminists of America. We wanted to create a collective autobiography of second wave feminism itself. This bold and ambitious goal became a sacred mission: to tell the story of the modern women's movement and to share the ideas and experiences of its pioneers and their inspirational legacy. Thus was created Veteran Feminists of America. By documenting the stories of feminist victories and sacrifices, VFA has now become the foremost resource for historians, academicians, librarians, and archivists, as well as for successive generations of girls and women we seek to educate and motivate. If you are an early feminist, we invite you, no, we urge you to participate in our Pioneer Histories project. We would love to add your story to our growing and important collection of first-person interviews and other resource materials. It will help us to continue our mission to inform the world about real battles fought by courageous feminists who made the women's revolution possible. You can find information on our website about how to arrange a videotaped interview for our VFA Pioneer Histories project by accessing veteranfeministsofamerica.org.
I'm Sue Arrington. I was born in Warsaw, Indiana, February 15, 1942. After I graduated from high school, there were only 16 in my class. Then went to Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, and graduated from there, and then went to graduate school at the University of Michigan.
How did your bringing up and your early life lead you to feminism?
There was definitely a division of labor in my home. And I always wanted to do the things that my brother got to do. And then when I went to IU for freshman orientation, remember this dean talking about living arrangements. And the women had hours that we had to be back in our dorms, and the boys didn't have anything. And he said, well, we don't have to worry about the boys getting in trouble if the girls are inside. And I was highly offended by that statement. When I got my first job, I got a credit card. It was a gas credit card, first one I'd ever had. Mm-hmm. But then when I got married, the credit card company said it had to go to my husband's name. And the same thing, I applied for some department store credit cards, and they all had to be Mrs. Paul Arrington, and I complained about that. And that's about the time that I found now. Not long after my second daughter was born, Betty Friedan came to Ball State to do a lecture. And as it turns out, I sat in a row just right beside a group of NOW members. And we got to talking, and they invited me to come to a reception afterwards at the home of a faculty member who was a NOW member. That was a reception for Betty. So that was my initiation to NOW. And at that time, Indiana had not yet ratified the Equal Rights Amendment. Mm-hmm. And so we were working on that. This was in the winter, and that's when the Indiana General Assembly is in session. There was a bill to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment before our legislature. And so we decided to take a busload of supporters to the Indiana General Assembly, to the State House. And we were so excited. We listened to the speeches. This was a hearing. And then they voted, and they voted it down. And we just couldn't understand, how could they vote down something that was so obviously needed? But anyway, they did. And so then the next year, we went and they voted it down again. So then we realized, and it really sort of came at a rally, when a supportive senator, his name was Senator Louis Mahern, spoke at our rally. And he said, sometimes it's easier to change legislators than it is to change a legislator's vote. And that's when we got political. One of the things that we did was modeled after the suffragists and had people stand silently in silent vigil
Mhm.
State House every day that they were in session.
Mhm.
Different group of people would just be there in white outfits,
Mhm.
standing, and then it came time for the vote. We all went to and sat in the gallery and watched them vote. But before they got to the vote, it was on a Thursday. Our legislature is in session Monday through Thursday.
Okay.
It was on Thursday afternoon, sort of not much going on. And a couple of our supportive legislators who lived in Northwest Indiana, up around Gary, had left early. And Phyllis Schlafly's Indiana person was Senator Joan Gubbins. And she got up and made this motion to recommit the ERA back to committee. Before they could vote, Senator Piper, my legislator, realized what she was doing, ran up and spoke to the president pro tem. He called a recess and sent the state police out to pick up those two senators that had left. The Senate was in recess until they got them back and they could vote no on recommitting. So you got to watch out for all the games that are played.
Indiana ratified the ERA. So what happened after that?
I became a National Now board member, and I ended up in the pilot group of ERA missionaries to Utah. This was something that the National Now, a national board, had come up with that, and I think it was from talking with Sonia, I've forgotten her last name, who was
Johnson.
Yes, she had talked with the Now leadership about what was happening in Utah and how they were organized against the hierarchy, was organized against the ERA, but she didn't really think that the people were. So that's why we went to it was a petition campaign modeled after their missionaries. There we would go 2 by 2, door to door, talking about the Equal Rights Amendment and asking people to sign our petition. And in Salt Lake City, we got a lot of people signing those petitions. When we had the ERA countdown campaign, when we're trying to get those final states, I went to Oklahoma. Mostly my job was being sort of like call central, working with the grassroots. Sometimes I would go out to on location and do meetings and talks. But a lot of times I was on the phone with the people, the organizers that from Oklahoma that we had identified, and give them new information, keep them engaged was what I did.
Then you went on to do other work on behalf of women.
Well, one of the issues that I was really involved with is abortion and reproductive rights. Toledo had an abortion clinic that was under siege, and the Toledo City Council was considering an ordinance that would effectively close them down. So I went to Cleveland along with several other Now members to help. It was mostly a phone campaign to gather support and ask people to contact their city council members, the mayor, to get a no vote out of them. In that case, we succeeded. And it's interesting, back then, one of the symbols of the issue was a little hanger, coat hanger.
Mhm.
The owner of the clinic, who was a woman, had gold hangers to use as like a little pendant to put on a chain that she gave to each of us who came to help out, which was, I still have it. It was
Amazing.
a very nice reminder of that time. One of the things I'm really proud of is while I was on the national board, we were the New Jersey board members. Was it Rosemary? I'm trying to think what her name was. Rosemary.
Dempsey, right?
Yes.
Dempsey.
She had a campaign to get Princeton to go co-ed. In fact, all of those big prestigious Ivy League
Mhm.
male-only colleges, universities, now and others, I think, had a campaign to get them to go co-ed. And Princeton did. And a few years later, my younger daughter enrolled in Princeton. So when I look back at what we veteran feminists,
Mhm.
the doors that we opened, it was so wonderful to see my own children going through those doors.
Well, let's talk about how the movement got you interested in elected life.
While I was still a NOW member, and I still am a NOW member, but
Right.
while I was still just active really in Muncie, I met the executive director of the local Planned Parenthood. We were standing in line at her husband was a university professor like mine. And there was a women's club that had a salad carry-in every September. So we brought our salads. We were standing in line to get our food when she said, I introduced myself. She said, "Oh, are you the Sue Arrington that's written those wonderful letters to the editor about abortion?" I said, "Well, yes, I am." And then she told me what she did, executive director of Planned Parenthood, and invited me to be on the board.
Mhm.
And so I was on the board of Planned Parenthood for several years and went off. And for a short time, maybe 3 years, I sold radio advertising. I wasn't a very good radio salesperson, to tell the truth. And one day she kept wanting me to work for her. So one day I called her up and I said, "You have a job you I might fit into?" She said, "Oh, yes." And so it was grassroots organizing, development, education. We were a fairly small operation. And so that's what I did. So while I was working for that, here in Muncie, in Delaware County, we were building a new county building. And it was a total fiasco. Cost overruns, years, beyond the time it was supposed to be built. It was a true scandal. And the election time was coming up, and the county council members at large were up. There were 3 of them. And they saw the handwriting on the wall. People were fed up with what they were doing. And so they all decided not to run. Well, by this time, I'd been around helping other candidates. I knew that an open seat was a really good thing.
Mhm.
So I went around to all my women friends, and there were no women on the council. So I went around to all the women that I knew that I thought would make good county council members. And every one of them turned me down. The last one that turned me down said, "Sue, why don't you run?" And that was the first time anybody had ever said that to me. And it was getting close to the filing deadline, and I wasn't getting anywhere twisting arms. So I thought, well, maybe I should. Maybe instead of pushing people along, I should get out in front and lead.
There you go.
So I my husband. I talked to my friends because I knew I needed more than just me to make it. And they all said, yes, Sue, do it. So I ran for county council and I won.
Mhm.
It was year of the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas
Wow.
hearings.
Mhm.
And there was a mood in the country that, men have sort of messed things up.
Mhm.
Maybe it's time for a woman. I heard that on the campaign trail as I was knocking at doors. There was one man I really remember who said, yeah, the men have made a mess of it. You ladies, you can clean it up. So I got elected, and that was known at that time as the year of the woman. So it was a very good year to be running as a woman. Then I had to decide, do I want to run for county council again, or would I want to run for something at the state level?
Mhm.
And my heart was still in those issues that the state legislature deals with.
Mhm.
Enjoyed the council, but I really wanted to get into something different. So I ran for the state House of Representatives against an incumbent who was a fairly moderate Republican and well-known and pretty well liked in town, as it turned out, and he beat me.
Okay.
So I still had money in my treasury. And I just left it there, bought a CD, kept it there. I was just about ready to cash it in and donate it to some other candidate when our longtime state senator decided to retire. I think he'd been in for like 24 years. Well, there's another open seat.
Mhm.
Still had money in that CD. So I did the same thing. I talked to my husband, I talked to my kids, I talked to my friends. They all said, do it. So I ran, and Senator Vice Simpson from Bloomington was my mentor in the Senate. She headed up the Senate campaign committee. She made sure that I had the money and the other resources to win. So having a mentor is really, really important. And she really helped me. So then I was in the Senate for 4 years, and she helped me get on some of the best committees. I loved the committees I was on in the Senate. It was a 4-year term, and in 2010, I ran again for re-election and lost. It was a Republican year, and a lot of Democrats lost that year. So I sat out for 2 years. Well, 2010, of course, was the census, and 2011 was redistricting.
Mhm.
The Republicans were in charge. They were in control in both houses for redistricting. And the Senate district I had represented the boundaries were changed so much that my house was no longer in that district.
Amazing.
Yeah. And the district, my new Senate district, included an incumbent Democrat senator that I really, really liked. And I thought, he's doing a good job. I'm not going to run against him.
Mhm.
So I sat it out. Well, in that same year of redistricting, they moved the house boundary so that my home was now in a district that was it was all Muncie.
Oh.
And the representative who had that seat ran for mayor the year before I ran for the House.
Okay.
So in 2011 and won his mayor's seat, had to give up the House seat. They put in a stand-in person, but he didn't run. So again, it was an open seat.
Beautiful.
In 2012, and I beat a pretty full field of Democrats in the primary, and it was a Democratic district.
Right.
So that's how I got in the House.
Well, that was wonderful. Well, all that organizing from now helped you a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Even our elections helped. knowing, how elections work. I've been on the National Elections Committee 2 or 3 times, and the voting and the organizing that you do for your team or your candidate just was really good training for when I started helping other candidates and then myself.
So now you're still in the legislature, correct?
Yes.
Are there things we forgot to talk about, Sue, that you want to add here?
In my early life, my mom was very traditional. And she could see that I was rebelling against all the traditional things that women did. The women's movement was a way that I could expand what a girl could be and what she could dream of being.
Yes, that's the story of a life and the story of a movement.
It is. So many of us had that.
We feel very fortunate, don't we?
Yes. And very proud of what we've done.
Wow.
Just today, I went to the women's rally for abortion justice.
Mhm.
And we rallied in the rain. It was pouring down rain in Indianapolis, but there were probably 1,000 people there. It was so heartening to see all those young women with veterans. Yeah, I think we inspire each other. Those younger ones keep us involved, keep us going, but we know that they're out there and they're doing the things we did when we were in our 30s.